The bridge of the UEV Chimera was a haven of calm in a universe simmering with potential conflict. Soft, utilitarian lighting illuminated focused faces, each officer a study in contained energy. Captain Eris Thorne stood in easy watch, his gaze fixed on the main view screen, which currently displayed a swirling tapestry of cosmic dust and nascent stars, the treacherous, beautiful chaos of the Obsidian Nebula. His posture was relaxed, yet an undercurrent of readiness hummed beneath the surface, a trait shared by his entire hand-picked crew. "Status report, Mr. Tanaka," Eris said, his voice a low baritone that carried effortlessly across the compact. Command deck, Kenji Tanaka, lead designer of the Chimera, and the genius who had breathed life into its radical concepts, swiveled slightly in his chair at the engineering console. His station was a complex array of readouts that would have bewildered most fleet engineers, displaying not just the ship's operational status, but the integrity of its elaborate disguise. "All systems nominal, Captain. Outer shell integrity is at 100%. Energy signature remains well within parameters for a Class C bulk freighter. We are, for all intents and purposes, a slow-moving brick." A rare, fleeting smile touched his lips. Eris nodded, a ghost of a smile mirroring Kenji's. "Good. Let's keep it that way until we can't." He glanced towards tactical. "Lena, any new Valentines from the Valtorians?" Valentines was their dry term for the intermittent censor sweeps the Valtorian Confederacy used to patrol their self-proclaimed territories. Tactical lead Lena Petrova, her dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail that somehow accentuated her sharp, intelligent eyes, tapped a command into her console. "Negative, Captain. Last passive sweep detected was 2 hours ago, originating from Sector Gamma 7 consistent with their established patrol routes. They're out there, but they haven't sniffed us yet." Her voice was crisp, efficient. "Current course will keep us well within the denser dust lanes. Sensor interference is optimal." "Optimal for us and for the package," Eris mused, thinking of the 3 heavily cloaked colony ships, the Hope, Endurance, and New Dawn, trailing miles behind them, shielded by the Chimera's deliberately mundane presence and the Nebula's natural interference. Their mission was simple on paper, audacious in reality. Escort these civilian vessels carrying thousands of souls seeking a new, unburdened life through territory the Valtorians considered exclusively their own. The Valtorian Confederacy, an ancient avian-descended empire, did not take kindly to uninvited guests, especially humans, whom they regarded as upstarts, noisy, unpredictable, and certainly not a species to be considered a serious power. Maintaining silent running, Communications Officer Davies reported from his station. "The colony ships are holding formation. No issues reported." Understood. Eris allowed himself a moment to appreciate the intricate dance they were performing. The Chimera was humanity's best-kept secret, a vessel born from the hard lessons learned in previous, less successful encounters with established galactic powers. It was a ship designed not for brute force but for cunning, adaptability, and the exploitation of enemy preconceptions. On the outside, she currently resembled the Stellar Wanderer, a battered, unremarkable cargo hauler registered to a defunct mining corporation. Internally, she was a marvel of engineering, a segmented predator waiting for the signal to shed her skin. "Estimated time to the clear zone, Navigator?" Eris asked. 12 hours, Captain, provided we maintain current speed and encounter no aggressive negotiations, Lieutenant Gia, the ship's navigator, replied, her fingers dancing over her console as she plotted alternative routes through the shifting gravitational tides of the nebula. "Let's hope any negotiations remain purely hypothetical," Eris said. He knew the Valtorians. Their idea of negotiation usually involved heavily armed Shrike-class cruisers and demands for unconditional surrender. The Confederacy's true sight sensor technology was legendary, capable of piercing most conventional stealth. But the Chimera wasn't conventional. Kenji Tanaka had ensured that. Her layered defenses, her chameleon-like ability to mimic other ship signatures, and her core design philosophy were all geared towards making true sight see only what the humans wanted it to see. A soft chime drew his attention back to Lena's station. "Captain," she said, her voice losing some of its earlier crispness replaced by a focused intensity. Multiple Valtorian signatures just dropped out of warp, edge of Sector Gamma 7, moving this way. Fast. Looks like a standard sweeper group. One heavy cruiser, designation VCS Imperious Claw by its energy profile, that'll be their flagship, and at least 4 Shrike-class escorts. Eris felt the familiar thrum of adrenaline, a cold, clear wave that sharpened his senses. So, much for hypothetical. He straightened, his relaxed posture vanishing. Well, Mr. Tanaka, it seems the Valtorians are eager for a closer look at our slow-moving brick. Let's prepare to give them a show they won't soon forget. The calm on the bridge didn't break, but it solidified, turning into a diamond-hard focus. Every officer knew their role. Every system was primed. The Chimera, deep within the Obsidian Nebula's embrace, continued its silent journey, a whisper in the dark, poised on the edge of becoming a roar. The Valtorians were coming, confident in their power, oblivious to the nature of the vessel sailing into their path. This was exactly what the Chimera was built for. Aboard the Valtorian Confederacy ship Imperious Claw, the atmosphere was one of disciplined arrogance. The vast bridge, a testament to Valtorian aesthetic precision and technological might, hummed with the quiet efficiency of a war machine confident in its dominance. At its heart stood High Admiral Theron Varkos, his obsidian eyes sharp as a raptor's, fixed on the swirling chaos of the Obsidian Nebula projected onto the primary command screen. His iridescent crest feathers, a deep amethyst, lay smooth against his skull, indicating a mood of composed authority. "Report," Varkos commanded, his voice resonating with the innate superiority of his ancient lineage and the power of the Third Stellar Fleet he led. Sub-Admiral Lyra Jax, her own emerald feathers neatly groomed, turned from her station. "High Admiral, the sweeper group has entered Sector Gamma 7 of the Obsidian Nebula. All Shrike-class cruisers report optimal true-sight sensor acuity, despite the particulate interference. We are proceeding as per the Varkos Doctrine, systematic sweeps, zero tolerance for unauthorized incursions." Varkos gave a curt nod, a slight rippling of his crest the only sign of his satisfaction. The Varkos Doctrine was his own strategic overlay on standard Valtorian patrol procedures. Aggressive, decisive, and designed to make an example of any who dared trespass in Confederacy space. It had served him well, earning him accolades and cementing Valtorian control over contested regions. "And these unauthorized incursions?" he pressed. "Any further clarification on their nature? The initial long-range scans were vague. Still, tracking residual gravitic distortions consistent with multiple sublight vessels attempting to mask their signatures." "High Admiral," Jax replied. "Likely smugglers or perhaps exploratory craft from one of the lesser systems. Their attempts at stealth are rudimentary, primitive." A faint sneer touched her beak-like features. "Primitives," Varkos echoed, the word laced with disdain. He tapped a clawed finger on the armrest of his command throne. "The galaxy is filled with them, scrabbling in the dark, occasionally bold enough to stray into the light of true civilization. This nebula has always attracted such vermin. Root them out, Sub-Admiral. Make it clear the Obsidian Nebula falls under the unyielding shadow of the Valtorian Confederacy." "It will be done, High Admiral," Jax affirmed. "The Shrike squadrons are already deploying in a standard gamma grid search pattern. Any vessel not broadcasting recognized Confederacy transponders will be challenged and boarded." "Resistance," she paused, allowing a hint of predatory anticipation into her tone, "will be met with overwhelming and decisive force." "Excellent." Varkos allowed himself a thin smile. He had built his career on decisive force. The Valtorians were the inheritors of this galactic arm, their technology centuries ahead of most, their fleets unmatched. The humans, he recalled from intelligence briefings, were a particularly bothersome example of these upstart species, rapidly expanding, annoyingly resilient, but ultimately possessing no true grasp of interstellar power dynamics. Their ships were clunky, their tactics predictable, relying on numbers rather than sophistication. The thought of them posing any genuine threat was laughable. Have we had any dealings with the humans in this sector previously? Varkos mused, more to himself than to Jax. Jax consulted her console. Minor trade infringements a few star cycles ago, High Admiral, easily rebuffed. Intelligence suggests their military capabilities are aspirational at best. Their heaviest cruisers would barely qualify as light escorts in our fleet. As expected, Varkos said, dismissing the humans from his immediate concern. His focus was on the integrity of Valtorian borders, the projection of Valtorian power. These incursions, whatever their origin, were an irritation, an untidiness that needed to be swept clean. Maintain vigilance, Sub-Admiral. The Nebula can play tricks even on true sight, ensure no shadow is left unexamined. Of course, High Admiral. The bridge of the Imperious Claw continued its silent, purposeful operation. Orders were given and acknowledged with crisp precision. On the main screen, icons representing the Shrike-class cruisers spread out, their sensor nets tightening around the suspected location of the intruders. Varkos watched, a master strategist observing his pieces move into position. He anticipated a swift resolution, a few cowering smugglers, perhaps a minor skirmish if they were foolish enough to resist, and then a report of mission accomplished. Varkos' doctrine was, after all, designed for efficiency, for the swift and brutal assertion of Valtorian supremacy. It had never failed him. He had no reason to believe today would be any different. The thought that something truly unexpected, something that could challenge the very foundations of his doctrine and Valtorian military understanding, might be lurking in those dark dust clouds did not even register as a remote possibility. Such was the confidence, the ingrained arrogance of High Admiral Theron Varkos and the mighty Valtorian Confederacy he served. The universe, in his experience, always bent to superior firepower and unwavering resolve, and the Valtorians undoubtedly possessed both in abundance. Deep within a particularly dense filament of the Obsidian Nebula, the VCS Night Hunter, a Shrike-class cruiser under the command of Captain Krell, glided through the cosmic murk. Krell, a young but ambitious Valtorian officer, was eager to make his mark. His iridescent wing-covered feathers, a striking sapphire blue, were sleeked back in concentration as he monitored his sensor displays. The true sight system was performing admirably, cutting through the nebula's interference like a divine blade. "Anything, Lieutenant?" Krell chirped, his voice sharp. "Unconfirmed energy signature, Captain," the sensor officer reported, his own crest feathers ruffling slightly with interest. "Low output, fluctuating. Could be a rogue asteroid with unusual metallic content, or it's stabilizing, sir. Definitely a vessel. Primitive drive signature, minimal energy readings. Broadcasting no recognized Confederacy transponder." Krell's beak curved into a predatory smile. "A trespasser, just as the High Admiral predicted, on screen." The main view screen shifted from the swirling nebula to a magnified image of a clunky asymmetrical vessel. It was pitted and scarred, with mismatched plating and a generally disreputable air. It looked less like a starship and more like a collection of spare parts that had accidentally achieved sentience. This was the UEV Chimera in its stellar wanderer disguise. "Identify," Krell commanded. "No official registry, Captain. The communications," officer replied after a moment. "Appears to be an old human design. Class C bulk freighter, possibly. Their technology is laughably outdated. Humans." Krell felt a flicker of contempt. He'd read the reports. A species that compensated for their lack of sophisticated technology with sheer, stubborn persistence. "Hail them. Standard warning. Order them to cut engines and prepare for boarding. Inform them that resistance is ill-advised." On the bridge of the UEV Chimera, Lena Petrova announced, "Captain, we're being hailed. It's the Night Hunter. They're ordering us to surrender and prepare for boarding." Eris Thorne allowed a grim smile. "Right on schedule. Open a channel, full audio-visual, but degrade our signal slightly. We wouldn't want to appear too competent." "Aye, Captain. Degrading visual, adding some static to the audio," Davies confirmed. The Night Hunter's view screen. The image of a human captain flickered into view. He looked harassed, slightly disheveled, and was surrounded by what appeared to be a very basic, almost archaic bridge. This was Eris Thorn playing his part. "This is Captain, Grogan of the freighter Stellar Wanderer," Eris said, his voice tinged with a carefully constructed nervousness and a layer of static. "We seem to be experiencing some, engine trouble. We mean no offense, Valtorian vessel. Just trying to make a delivery." Krell's crest feathers ruffled in amusement. Grogan. Even their name sounded clumsy. "Captain Grogan?" Krell's voice was imperious, dripping with condescension. "You are trespassing in sovereign Valtorian Confederacy territory. Your engine trouble is of no concern to us. You will cut your engines immediately and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will result in your vessel's destruction. Do you understand?" "Boarded." Eris feigned panic. "Oh dear, that sounds rather serious. Look, we're just humble traders. Perhaps a small fine—" "Your humility is irrelevant," Krell snapped, enjoying the human's apparent fear. "Your only option is compliance. Cut your engines now." He gestured to his tactical officer. "Lock weapons. Just a precaution, of course." "On the Chimera," Lena reported. "They're locking weapons. Captain, standard particle beams and missile salvos. Nothing we can't handle even in this configuration, but it's a bit impolite for a first date." "Let them feel confident," Eris murmured. "To the Valtorians," he said. All right. No need to get trigger happy. Cutting engines now, but she's— An old girl takes a while to cool down the, fusion coils." He made a show of barking orders to unseen crew members, interspersed with theatrical sighs of frustration. Kenji Tanaka, monitoring the Night Hunter's sensor activity, gave Aris a subtle nod. "They're scanning us intensively, Captain, focusing on our drive signature and what they perceive as our primary systems. Their true sight is seeing exactly what we're showing them, an aging freighter with a sputtering reactor and minimal defensive capabilities." "Perfect," Aris said under his breath. To Krell, he announced, "Engines shutting down, Valtorian, vessel. Please be gentle with us. We're not equipped for aggressive inspections." Captain Krell allowed himself a self-satisfied smirk. The human was practically begging. This would be an easy capture, a footnote in his report to High Admiral Varkos. "Maintain weapons lock," he ordered his tactical officer. "Helm, bring us alongside the human vessel. Boarding party, prepare for deployment. I want their cargo manifests and captain's log within the hour." The VCS Night Hunter began its approach, its sleek, predatory form a stark contrast to the Chimera's bulky, unassuming silhouette. It moved with the confident grace of a superior power, its captain oblivious to the fact that he was not the hunter, but the prey, being carefully lured into a meticulously prepared trap. Aboard the Imperious Claw, High Admiral Varkos received Krell's interim report. Lone human freighter, Class C, offering no resistance. Proceeding to board and secure, Varkos acknowledged with a dismissive wave of his clawed hand. "Predictable. Inform me when they have the prisoners and cargo." He turned his attention to larger strategic considerations, the minor inconvenience of a lost human freighter already fading from his thoughts. The hook had been baited, and the Valtorians, blinded by their arrogance and the Varkos doctrine, were taking it with gusto. The distance between the Night Hunter and the Chimera closed. On the human bridge, the calm was absolute. The tension, a coiled spring. Eris Thorn watched the approaching Valtorian cruiser on his screen, his eyes like chips of ice. "Almost time, team," he said quietly. "Let's prepare to show Captain Krell what true human ingenuity looks like." The VCS Night Hunter closed the distance to the Stellar Wanderer with predatory grace, its Shrike-class frame dwarfing the seemingly helpless human freighter. On its bridge, Captain Krell preened, his sapphire crest feathers puffed with self-importance. "Boarding party status," he chirped. "Ready for deployment on your command, Captain," came the reply. "Shuttle bay doors cycling. Excellent. Helm, bring us to within 500 clicks, standard boarding formation." Krell leaned back in his command chair, anticipating a swift and uneventful takeover. His true sight sensors painted a clear picture of the human ship, An ancient, underpowered vessel with failing systems and no discernible advanced weaponry. Its energy signature was pathetic, a mere flicker compared to the robust thrum of his own warship. Aboard the UEV Chimera, the EUD atmosphere was electric. Every officer was at peak readiness, their movements economical and precise. Captain Eris Thorne watched the Valtorian cruiser fill the main view screen, its arrogant profile a stark symbol of the Confederacy's overconfidence. They're well within the optimal engagement envelope, Captain, Lena Petrova reported, her voice a low, steady hum. Energy readings on the Night Hunter are stable, weapons armed but not actively charging for a full barrage. They're expecting a docile target. Kenji Tanaka's fingers danced across his console. Outer shell actuators primed, all decoy transponders ready for termination. Module separation sequence is green across the board, Captain. Eris took a slow, deliberate breath. This was the moment, the culmination of years of planning, design, and relentless training. Mr. Davies, he said to his communications officer, send Captain Krell one final message. Tell him, thank you for your cooperation. Davies grinned. Aye, Captain, message sent. On the Night Hunter's bridge, Krell's communications officer looked up, a flicker of confusion on his face. Captain, another message from the human vessel. It just says, thank you for your cooperation. Krell frowned, his crest feathers twitching. What nonsense is this? Are they mocking us? He was about to bark an order to jam their communications when the universe outside his view screen went utterly, spectacularly insane. The stellar wanderer, the clumsy, disreputable freighter, began to convulse. Not in the death throes of a failing ship, but with the violent, purposeful energy of something monstrous being born. Large sections of its scarred hull, the mismatched plating, the faux cargo containers, the entire dilapidated superstructure, cracked, split, and then explosively jettisoned outwards, blooming like metallic petals from some impossible flower. What, in the void, is happening? Krell shrieked, leaping to his feet, his arrogance vaporizing in a flash of cold shock. Sensors, report. The sensor officer was frantically trying to make sense of the chaotic readings. Captain, the target, yeah, it's breaking apart, but it's not an explosion. Multiple new contacts, smaller high-energy signatures. I can't classify them. Their profiles don't match any known human designs, or any known designs. Before Krell could process this, the transformation completed. Where the lumbering stellar wanderer had been, now hung 5 sleek, lethal shapes, gleaming with an inner light against the dark nebula. They were angular, predatory, each distinct in form, yet clearly part of a terrifying whole. One was a heavily armored wedge, bristling with what looked like kinetic launchers. Another was a slender, rapier-like vessel, already glowing with an ominous energy. A third was a disc-shaped craft, its surface shimmering with complex sensor arrays. The fourth and fifth were smaller, faster, almost fighter-like in their aggressive posture. This was the UEV Chimera, unveiled. Captain Thorne, Kenji Tanaka reported, his voice filled with a quiet, fierce pride. Metamorphosis complete. All 5 modules report fully operational. The Alpha E-War module is first on deck. Engage, Eris commanded, his voice like chilled steel. The disc-shaped module, Alpha, pulsed once. On the bridge of the Night Hunter, alarms blared with sudden, cacophonous intensity. Screens went dark, then flickered with cascades of meaningless data. Captain! The tactical officer screamed, his voice cracking. Targeting systems offline, communications jammed. True sight it's blind. We've lost all external sensor feeds. Krell stared in horror as the 5 unknown craft, now clearly visible as coordinated attackers, began to move with terrifying speed and precision. The rapier-like module Beta flashed towards them, and a lance of pure energy, impossibly focused, seared across the Night Hunter's primary shield emitter, causing it to overload in a shower of sparks. Shields failing. Port flank. The wedge-shaped module Gamma unleashed a volley of hypervelocity slugs. Without shields or accurate targeting, the Night Hunter was a sitting duck. The slugs hammered into its port engine nacelle, tearing through armor plating as if it were paper. The Valtorian cruiser shuddered violently, a deep groan of tortured metal echoing through its decks. Engine damage, we're losing power. Captain Krell could only watch, his mind struggling to comprehend the impossible reality unfolding before him. This wasn't a freighter. This was a pack of wolves in sheep's clothing. The sheer audacity of the deception, the terrifying efficiency of the attack. It was beyond anything in his training, anything in Valtorian military doctrine. They tricked us, he whispered, his sapphire crest feathers drooping in utter shock and disbelief. His ship, a proud Shrike-class cruiser of the Valtorian Confederacy, was being dismantled piece by piece, not by a superior force, but by a smarter one, a more devious one. The two smaller modules, Delta and Epsilon, darted in, their point defense, lasers systematically neutralizing the Night Hunter's desperate, uncoordinated return fire. Within 90 seconds of the Chimera shedding its skin, the VCS Night Hunter was crippled, adrift, its systems shattered, its crew stunned into terrified silence. On the Chimera's command module, Lena Petrova gave her report, her voice calm, but with an undeniable edge of triumph. Target neutralized, Captain. All primary weapon systems disabled, propulsion critically damaged. Life support appears intact. They are no longer a threat. Eris Thorne looked at the image of the crippled Valtorian cruiser. No explosions, no unnecessary loss of life beyond what combat dictated. Just a swift, surgical, and utterly shocking takedown. Good, he said. Very good. Mr. Tanaka, are the colony ships clear of the immediate vicinity? Yes, Captain. Kenji confirmed. They proceeded on course under cloak the moment we engaged. They should be well on their way to the clear zone. Excellent. Eris allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The first test of the Chimera in a live combat scenario against a Valtorian warship had exceeded all expectations. Now, he said, his gaze hardening slightly, let's prepare for the Admiral's response. I suspect Captain Krell's superiors will be far less cooperative. The bridge of the VCS Imperious Claw was an oasis of calm, far removed from the violent, localized chaos engulfing the Night Hunter. High Admiral Theron Varkos was reviewing stellar cartography for a planned fleet exercise in a neighboring system, the earlier report of a captured human freighter already a distant, trivial memory. His amethyst crest feathers were relaxed, his demeanor one of serene command. This tranquility was shattered by an urgent chirp from the communications station. High Admiral, we've lost contact with the VCS Night Hunter. Varkos looked up, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. Lost contact, explain. A simple freighter takedown should not result in communications blackout. Equipment malfunction? Unknown, High Admiral. The officer stammered, his own crest feathers beginning to ruffle in agitation. One moment Captain Krell was reporting, his intention to board. The next, static. And then this, sir. He rerouted a data burst to the main command screen. It was a fragmented, heavily corrupted stream of sensor telemetry, the last panicked seconds from the Night Hunter. The image was chaotic, the freighter target suddenly erupting not in an explosion but in a shedding. Then, multiple new contacts, small, impossibly fast, with energy signatures that defied classification. The telemetry was riddled with error codes, true sight failing. Targeting systems offline, messages flashing before the feed cut entirely. Varkos stared, his beak slightly agape. What is this mockery? He demanded, his voice dangerously low. Is this a system glitch? A sensor ghost swarm? Sub-Admiral Lyra Jax, who had moved to his side, was pale beneath her emerald feathers. The energy signatures, High Admiral. They are unlike anything in our databases. And the Night Hunter's system failures. It suggests advanced electronic warfare, far beyond the capabilities of any known human vessel. Humans? Varkos spat the word like a curse. This cannot be humans. They build floating scrapyards, not this. He jabbed a clawed finger at a freeze frame of one of the Chimera's modules, a sleek, angular predator. Run diagnostics on our own sensor arrays. Could it be a previously unencountered species? All our systems are nominal, High Admiral. the chief sensor officer reported, his voice tight. "The data, corrupted as it is, appears genuine." The night hunter was engaged and overwhelmed. A tense silence descended on the bridge, broken only by the frantic tapping of consoles as officers tried to make sense of the impossible. The Varkos Doctrine, the bedrock of the High Admiral's strategic thinking, had no contingency for this. His doctrine was built on known threats, on predictable enemy capabilities, on the unshakable truth of Valtorian technological superiority. This violated every tenet. "Dispatch a wing of Shrike cruisers to the Night Hunter's last known coordinates," Varkos ordered, his voice now hard, stripped of its earlier arrogance. "Maximum alert. I want to know what happened to Captain Krell and his ship, and I want to know what those things are." "Aye, High Admiral," Jax acknowledged, already relaying the orders. 3 Shrike-class cruisers operating nearby, detached from the main sweeper group and accelerated towards the coordinates, their crews now on high alert. Varkos paced the command deck, his crest feathers flicking erratically, a clear sign of his inner turmoil. His mind raced, replaying the fragmented data, the speed of the engagement, the apparent sophistication of the unknown vessels, the complete failure of a frontline Valtorian cruiser systems. It was a tactical nightmare. If these were indeed human vessels, then Valtorian intelligence was catastrophically flawed. If they were something else, the implications were equally dire. "High Admiral," the communications officer interrupted again, his voice strained. "We're picking up a faint, wide-beam transmission. It's an automated distress call. Valtorian Shrike class, it's the Night Hunter. Put it through," Varkos barked. A heavily distorted voice laced with static and sheer terror filled the bridge. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Captain Krell of the VCS Night Hunter, attacked by unknown craft, disguised as human freighter. 5 hostile modules, overwhelming firepower, systems crippled. We are adrift. They were like phantoms. It's impossible. It can't be." The transmission devolved into incoherent sobbing and then cut out, replaced by the repetitive automated beacon. The bridge crew of the Imperious Claw listened in stunned silence. Captain Krell, known for his youthful arrogance but also his competence, sounded utterly broken. "Disguised as a human freighter," Varkos repeated slowly, the words tasting like ash in his beak. 5 hostile modules. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The initial, vague incursions. The lone freighter. The deception, the attack. It was a deliberate, sophisticated trap, and the Valtorians in their hubris had flown right into it. "The humans," Jax whispered, her emerald feathers now completely flat against her skull, a sign of deep shock and fear. It was the humans, but how? High Admiral Theron Varkos didn't answer. His mind was a maelstrom of shattered assumptions. His doctrine, his understanding of the galaxy, his belief in Valtorian supremacy, all of it was crumbling. The aspirational humans, the builders of floating scrapyards, had just demonstrated a level of cunning and technological surprise that was, as Krell had babbled, seemingly impossible. His sharp eyes darted to the tactical display showing the 3 Shrike cruisers speeding towards the Night Hunter's location. What had he just sent them into? He had assumed they were going to investigate a wreck, perhaps engage a single, albeit potent, unknown. But 5 coordinated modules? Capable of disabling a Shrike-class cruiser in minutes? "Recall those Shrike cruisers," Varkos suddenly ordered, his voice tight with a new, unfamiliar emotion. "Apprehension. No, amend that. Order them to proceed, with extreme caution, to scout, not engage, and dispatch the rest of the 7th Tactical Wing to their position. Full combat readiness. I want every ship in this sector converging on those coordinates." The Varkos Doctrine was in tatters. Where once there was arrogant confidence, now there was a dawning, terrifying uncertainty. The Valtorian Empire had just been slapped in the face, hard, by an opponent they had dismissed as insignificant. And High Admiral Theron Varkos, for the first time in his decorated career, felt a chill of genuine fear snake down his spine. The game had changed, and the Valtorians were no longer making all the rules. The humans, it seemed, had their own. While High Admiral Varkos wrestled with the terrifying new reality aboard the VCS Imperious Claw, the UEV Chimera's 5 modules, now operating with lethal autonomy yet perfect cohesion, prepared for the inevitable Valtorian response. Captain Eris Thorne from the command module, the Aegis, watched the tactical display where 3 Valtorian Shrike-class cruisers were rapidly approaching the last known coordinates of the crippled Night Hunter. "They're coming, Captain," Lena Petrova announced, her voice a model of calm precision from her station on the Aegis. 3 Shrike-class, call signs Harbinger, Interceptor, and Stalker. Standard arrowhead formation, but they're pulsing active. Scans at maximum power. Someone's rattled their cage. "Let's give them something more to be rattled about," Eris replied. "Kenji, are the colony ships clear?" "Affirmative, Captain." Kenji Tanaka's voice came through the comm from the Alpha E-War module, where his expertise was best utilized. The Hope, Endurance, and New Dawn used the initial engagement as cover. They've adjusted course deeper into the sensor-dampening dust clouds. Another hour and they'll be past the Valtorian picket line and on their way to the rendezvous. "Good. Our primary objective is nearly complete," Eris said. "Now for the secondary. Ensure the Valtorians understand that human space is not to be trifled with, and that their true sight isn't infallible. Lena, deploy the Echoes." "Deploying Echoes now, Captain," Petrova confirmed. The Delta module, a specialist in deploying countermeasures and signature manipulation, began to sow. The nebula with a network of minute, short-lived devices. These Echoes were designed to create fleeting ghost-like sensor returns, mimicking the energy signatures of small craft, debris, or even minor spatial anomalies, just enough to flood and confuse the Valtorians' already strained sensor systems. The 3 approaching Shrike cruisers, Harbinger, Interceptor, and Stalker, soon flew into this web of phantoms. Their already heightened senses were bombarded. "Commander?" The sensor officer on the VCS Harbinger, the lead Shrike, reported to its Valtorian captain. Multiple intermittent contacts appearing and disappearing throughout the sector. Too many to track effectively. They're like ghosts. The Harbinger's captain, a veteran named Vorok, felt his crest feathers prickle. High Admiral Varkos warned of unconventional tactics. Maintain formation. Prioritize targets that hold a consistent signature. This could be a deception. It was, but not the kind he imagined. "Lena, Beta, and Gamma modules, you have your targets," Eris ordered. "Alpha, blanket their local comms, selective jamming. We want them confused, not deaf. Delta and Epsilon, you're on screening and opportunistic strikes. Let the dance begin." The Chimera's modules moved. They didn't engage in a head-on assault. That was Valtorian doctrine. Instead, they became part of the nebula itself. The Alpha E-War module pulsed, and the tight beam communications between the Shrike cruisers became crackly and unreliable. Orders were garbled, acknowledgements missed. Frustration began to build, on their bridges. Then the slender Beta module, built for precision strikes, emerged from behind a dense dust cloud. It fired a single searing energy lance that sliced through the Interceptor's primary shield array on its exposed flank, precisely targeting an identified vulnerability from the Night Hunter engagement. Before the Interceptor could react or its escorts could bring weapons to bear, Beta vanished back into the nebula's embrace. "Status of the Interceptor," Captain Vorok of the Harbinger demanded, his voice tight as he fought comm interference. "Yields down. Minor hull breach. They vanished, Captain," came the fragmented reply. Simultaneously, the heavily armed Gamma module executed a high-speed pass on the VCS Stalker. It didn't try to destroy it. Instead, it unleashed a targeted volley of kinetic disruptors at the Stalker's primary sensor, mast. The mast, the very eyes of the Valtorian true sight, shattered into a million pieces. The Stalker was now blind, relying on its sister ships for targeting data that was already being corrupted by the Echoes and the Alpha modules. "Interference. The Stalker reports loss of all primary sensors," someone yelled on the Harbinger's bridge. Captain Vorok felt a cold dread. This wasn't a battle. It was a vivisection. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere, striking with surgical precision, and then disappearing before his ships could retaliate effectively. Their formations, designed for fleet engagements against comparable capital ships, were useless against these phantoms that danced on the edge of perception. The smaller, more agile Delta and Epsilon modules darted through the chaos, laying proximity, micromines in the Shrike cruisers' predicted paths and taking potshots at maneuvering thrusters, further degrading their cohesion. One such mine detonated near the interceptor's already damaged flank, sending it into an uncontrolled spin. "They're hurting us," Vorak realized with a sickening lurch, "forcing us apart." Aboard the VCS Imperious Claw, High Admiral Varkos watched the unfolding disaster on his main tactical display with growing horror. The icons representing his Shrike cruisers were flashing amber and red, their telemetry feeds increasingly erratic. He saw reports of phantom contacts, sensor failures, and ships taking damage from unseen assailants. His reinforcements, the rest of the 7th Tactical Wing, were still minutes away, an eternity in this kind of engagement. "They are dismantling my fleet piece by piece," Varkos breathed, his voice barely a whisper. The confidence, the arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow understanding. He was facing an enemy that didn't play by any rules he knew. His doctrines, his strategies, the vaunted Valtorian true sight, all were being rendered irrelevant. The Chimera's Aegis module. Eris Thorn observed the tactical plot. The 3 Shrike cruisers were now separated, confused, and increasingly damaged. The interceptor was tumbling. The stalker was blind. The Harbinger was desperately trying to rally, firing wildly into sensor ghosts. "Lena," Eris said calmly, "advise Beta and Gamma to deliver the disabling blows. No unnecessary destruction. We've made our point here. Their main fleet reinforcements will be arriving soon. Time to prepare our exit." The Phantom Gambit had worked. The Valtorian squadron, sent to investigate and destroy, had instead been systematically outmaneuvered, outthought, and outfought, not by overwhelming power, but by an intelligence that used the very environment and their enemy's own rigid doctrines against them. The Obsidian Nebula, once a symbol of Valtorian control, had become a graveyard for their assumptions. With Captain Thorn's command, the Chimera's modules executed their final decisive actions. The Beta module, its energy core glowing with focused intensity, delivered precise, debilitating shots to the drive systems of the already floundering VCS Interceptor and the sensor-blinded VCS Stalker. The strikes weren't aimed at their reactors or life support, but at rendering them immobile and helpless, monuments to Valtorian fallibility. The Gamma module, meanwhile, converged on the last struggling Shrike, the VCS Harbinger. Captain Vorak, aboard his crippled vessel, watched in grim resignation as the heavily armed human module approached. Its weapon ports aglow. He braced for annihilation. Instead, a barrage of specialized disruptor fire slammed into his ship's main weapon arrays, silencing them with contemptuous ease. His engines, already strained, sputtered and died under a secondary volley. The Harbinger drifted, powerless. Across the bridge of the Harbinger, the surviving crew stared at their dead consoles, the silence broken only by the hiss of emergency atmospheric regulators. The ghostly human craft, having ensured their complete neutralization, didn't press the attack, they simply stopped. Then, as quickly and silently as they had appeared, the 5 distinct modules began to move, not in retreat, but in a coordinated, almost balletic convergence. They drew together in the heart of the dust cloud, where the stellar wanderer had first revealed its true form. There, amidst the swirling nebular particles, they redocked, their individual forms merging, reshaping. On the Aegis command module, Eris Thorn watched the metamorphosis in reverse. "Status, Kenji?" "Reintegration 80% complete, Captain," Kenji Tanaka reported, his voice calm despite the incredible feat of engineering unfolding. "Outer shell deploying, signature dampeners active. We are reverting to the Stellar Wanderer profile. Or perhaps something even more innocuous this time, the lazy comet perhaps." Eris allowed a faint smile. "Let's stick with the classics for now. Full stealth configuration once the shell is secure. Set course for the designated extraction point. The colony ships should be well clear, and I believe High Admiral Varkos has received our message." Within minutes, the 5 lethal predators were gone. In their place, a battered-looking, entirely unremarkable freighter, the UEV Chimera, once more hidden beneath its mundane skin, silently slipped away into the deepest, darkest currents of the Obsidian Nebula, leaving behind a scene of utter Valtorian devastation. Aboard the VCS Imperious Claw, High Admiral Theron Varkos watched the tactical display with a frozen expression. The icons of the Harbinger, Interceptor, and Stalker were all dark red, crippled, non-responsive to hails, broadcasting only automated distress signals. The multiple unidentifiable hostile contacts that had tormented them had vanished as if they were never there. His reinforcements, the mighty 7th Tactical Wing, arrived to find only silence, drifting wrecks, and the terrified, incoherent babble of the surviving crews when rescue shuttles finally reached them. Sub-Admiral Lyra Jack stood beside him, her emerald feathers dull, her usual sharp demeanor completely absent. "High Admiral," she said, her voice barely a croak, "the initial damage reports from the rescue teams. The ships are savable, minimal casualties, but they were systematically disarmed, as if the enemy chose not to destroy them." Varkos slowly nodded, the gesture heavy with the weight of realization. "They made an example of us," he said, his voice hollow. "They demonstrated not just power, but precision, control. They wanted us to know they could have annihilated Krell and Vorok's ships, but they chose not to." He looked at Jax, his obsidian eyes reflecting a dawning unfamiliar dread. This wasn't just an attack. It was a statement. The implications were staggering. The humans, the primitive upstarts, possessed technology and tactical acumen that could render Valtorian warships helpless. They could appear as harmless freighters, then transform into multi-vector attack platforms. They could blind true sight, cripple ships with surgical accuracy, and vanish without a trace. The Varkos doctrine, his entire career built upon aggressive certainty, was not just broken. It was proven to be a dangerously naive fantasy against such an opponent. He thought of the reports that would need to be filed, the explanations demanded by the High Command. How could he articulate the nature of this defeat? How could he convey the sheer, paradigm-shattering shock of what had occurred in the Obsidian Nebula? The Valtorian Confederacy's long-held belief in its own inherent superiority felt like a fragile shard of glass, now cracked beyond repair. "Recall the fleet," Varkos ordered, his voice devoid of its usual confident ring. "Secure the survivors. Retrieve the data." He couldn't bring himself to call them wrecks, not yet, and dispatch our fastest courier ship to the capital. High Command must be informed immediately. The humans are not what we believed. As the Imperious Claw began the grim task of overseeing the recovery, Theron Varkos stared out at the swirling colors of the Obsidian Nebula. It no longer looked like a mere territory to be controlled. It felt like a shroud beneath which a new and terrifying power had stirred. The confidence of the Valtorian Empire had been deeply, perhaps irrevocably, shaken. Fear, an emotion long dismissed by their proud warrior caste when considering lesser species, had found fertile ground. The echoes of the Chimera's phantom gambit would resonate through the Valtorian Confederacy for star cycles to come. This was not just a lost skirmish. It was the dawn of a new age of doubt, a chilling realization that humanity, so long underestimated, was a force to be reckoned with, a species capable of turning the galaxy's established order on its head with terrifying ingenuity and a will as indomitable as any star. The universe, for High Admiral Theron Varkos and his kind, had suddenly become a much more uncertain and far more dangerous place.